Welcome to Dan's Diary. You may have been following my other videos about how I constructed my house and how I built my man cave. Those are still going on, by the way, so if you please take the time to look at those. Maybe you'll find them interesting as well. This is about how I wrote my first novel, the story of Dubai's first bank robbery. Needless to say, it is fiction. I would never get involved in anything like that. I chose a subject which I know. I mean, it's no use me writing about submarines, for instance. I've never even seen a submarine, so I couldn't write about that. People that have seen a submarine or been on one could tear holes in the script. So, luckily I was involved in construction for all of my life. And I've got a damn good idea from building inception to handover of roughly every single thing that goes on a building site. Putting myself in the lead character's head, I could give a fairly decent representation of how you build a property from start to finish. How you would build in defects. You could do it with just one person. You could do it with a series of 3 or 4 people all in on the storyline, and only they would know, and then they could return at a later date and rob the place. Quite easily done. So that was the premise of my story. I hadn't even gone so far as to deciding who was going to do the actual robbery. I had an Excel spreadsheet which I put a horizontal line, and I put notes on that line as to the main storyline, and then underneath at various stages I put one-word notes as to what to introduce in that storyline at that particular moment. For instance, introduction of the main character, introduction of the idea of a robbery, how he would do the robbery, and the investigation of all the different things he would need to investigate before he actually undertook it, the construction of the defects, maintaining the secrecy of those defects right up until handover stage of the building. That lot is what I'm talking about. So that lot needs flushing out. So you need to describe all of that in a story. But for now, we're just writing notes. So you'll write notes into each section along that line. So when you do write it, you can look at these notes and you can flesh it out in your brain and start typing. An example. If during this construction process, this building and construction process, there is an element here, let's say the windows. How does he get access to the windows if they're all alarmed? Because it's a bank, so they're going to be alarmed. So you'll have to put into the construction process somewhere about the windows and how you disconnect the windows from the alarm system. You will also have to add in this process about security. There's going to be night security, and they're going to have to be dealt with in some way to get them out the building or tied up or whatever. So you'll introduce earlier on in the story ideas about how you'll action that problem. And then how I did it, incidentally, was I would write a section just on the security, nothing else. And then I would split that story up into maybe 3 or 4 sections of maybe a page each, and I'd put them along the storyline somewhere. Let's go back to the window issue. So I'd write the storyline about the window, how you find out that the windows are alarmed, how you contact the supplier to get a sample window, how you then dismantle the window to find out the pluses and the minuses of that particular window, how you then incorporate that into the building, and how you disconnect and connect afterwards the windows back so no one knows that you've been fiddling with them. And I wrote that story. I split it up into 3-4 sections, and I put that in my overall story. Now you see what's happening. So as you read, you'll read a bit about the windows, you'll read about the security, you read about the windows, read about security, and rather than one long section, you'll be reading about things and the story's dragging you along. What I did, I had a colour code. So all of the window sections were coloured green, security was coloured red, the main story was coloured, I don't know, blue, and I must have had 8 or 9 different sections with different colours, all scattered, all written, split up and then stuck in the main storyline at various stages. So when you read through it, it was all different colours, which helped you if you got one of these out of sequence. Oh, how can the security man be walking the premises when he hasn't arrived on site yet? He doesn't arrive on site for another 2 pages. So you can move that section in, let's say blue, into 2 pages further along, so it now flows in line. Much easier to do that than starting at page 1 and writing the whole story. A, you'll get it wrong, and B, you'll lose interest because you've got so many balls in the air. Just concentrate on one ball at a time. Then you're going to go back to the beginning and you're going to add descriptions, random throughout this section, of the weather. You're not going to say the weather was great, the weather was bad, the weather was this, the weather was that every page. But maybe there's nothing stopping you when your main characters go outside of the building or look out of a window. There's nothing stopping you adding, and the streaking with rain, and you think, okay, I've introduced rain. So a page further on, they are outside. He was only looking through a window before, so now he needs an umbrella. So you can add that to the storyline, and it just enhances it. And you could even introduce, maybe he slips a little on one of the flagstones that's wet. Maybe 20 pages further along, you could say he got a bit of a twinge in his groin from straining it earlier when he slipped on that flagstone. And it's all linking in, you see. The reader thinks, yeah, you know what, I've done that. I've had that before. It's happened to me. So you're adding superfluous words into the document to make it more readable. You're going to include a description of the person himself, how he's feeling in himself. When you introduce a new character, you may wish to do a description of that character. I chose to give 1 or 2 of the characters a nickname, and then instead of referring to him as his proper name in the book, I referred to him as the nickname. I haven't seen any other author do that, so I thought that would be quite amusing. And I wrote it as I think in my head, as I talk, as I imagine things would happen in a parallel universe. For instance, when I described a part of the story where the main character is on board a yacht. Now, I lived on a yacht for 4 or 5 years, so I know roughly the parts of the yacht and the layouts of a marina. If you don't know part of the story that you're writing about, go and find one. Go and find a marina and have a walk around it. Have a look at a big yacht and imagine living on it. I'm sure you can muddle along quite well with description, the various descriptions about things, the wind, if it's raining, if it's dark, if it's light, just to add a bit of storyline so the reader is brought along with it. A section in the book where they have to ride their motorcycles past the Brennan Pass because obviously the police are looking out for them. They know their details, they've got the passport details. So how do I get the main characters across Europe without being seen by the police? Well, I figured a way. So I put that in the book. And I love motorcycles. So I incorporated a little bit of off-roading in the book. And that was a good section as well. I enjoyed writing that. Because I put myself in that story. And don't forget, you would-be criminals, every section in this book you could do. I'm not writing how to rob a bank in Dubai, but that said, if you followed the storyline, yeah, could you or couldn't you? And that is, in my eyes, that is the essence of a good book. You don't want to be finishing a book like those early James Bonds where he's in space or where he's fighting sharks or stuff like this, and you think, nah, I used to think I could do it, but it's getting a bit silly now, isn't it? So it's a grounded book where if you think about it and you followed the steps that I've written about, maybe you could do it, maybe you couldn't. So, once you've got your manuscript to a level of you're happy with it, you've got your main element, you've got your side elements, they're all linking in, you've read it 10 times and you're happy with it, you then sit back and you leave it for about 3 months. And then you read it all again and you'll find you're changing bits you thought you liked. You really are. So you've only described so far the robbery itself. You haven't described how they get away with it. So now the whole process starts again. You'll have a timeline, you'll have little sections with notes underneath it. And again, I think I told you, I didn't write my timeline, my main timeline, from that bit to that bit. I chose sections I felt like writing that morning. Say there was a section about getting the diamonds out of Dubai. How would I do that? So I'd write about that little element of the works. Maybe it was four pages. I'd split it down the middle, 2 pages each, at a convenient point in that description of how you get them out. And I put one at that part, and I'd leave it a couple of pages, and I'd put the end bit further in the book, rather than just do it in one long, boring section. I split it up. How you got the money out. Again, I did exactly the same. I split that up into several sections, and at that point, I realised I needed to change bits in the first story, the actual robbery itself, because now I've got a certain volume of money which I haven't described in the first bit. You can't just introduce something halfway through a book. So for instance, if I've got 8 suitcases of money and I've only described in a page how you got the money out of the bank, you're thinking, no, hang on a minute. So you've got to go back into your first bit and give the reader the knowledge that there's masses of money here. How are you going to do it? And that gave me a right problem, because how would they do it? How would you get 8 suitcases of money when you haven't got the suitcases, you haven't brought them with you, out of the bank? How? You can't walk out the main door, you can't hail a taxi. So you've got to introduce that into the story, and that involves bringing into the story a vehicle. Well, we haven't even thought about a vehicle yet. So you go back and you write about a vehicle, don't you? You write about the hiring of the vehicle, who's going to hire it, where they're going to get it from, how they're going to get it in a position so you can use it on the day. And when it's got the money in, where does it go after that? You've got to dispose of the vehicle, otherwise the police know exactly who's been involved, because it's sitting in their driveway. So you've got to dispose of the vehicle. Well, all of that needs to be added in at some stage. Again, just write it out, write your little notes, write your main story, give it a colour, split it up into sections and stick it where you like in the book. And then put the book down for a couple of months, and then read it again from the start. I bet you change 25% of what you've written. You'll change your description. There'll be sections that you're leading the reader on, and then you've written a new section in a different format or style or frame of mind, and it's gone weird. So you'll rewrite that section so it flows on. If I've not described that very well, you will recognise it when you do it yourself. So now we've got the storyline of the robbery and how we get the money out. Yeah, okay. So where's the book? So what? They've done a robbery and they've got away with it. You're going to stop it there? Well, no, because you've got to include now what the police are going to do. So you'll write a complete section about how the police get involved to look at the evidence, interview people, fingerprints, blood groups, security passes, everything that they would do to find the perpetrators of this crime, how they would follow the lines of inquiry from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, until they get an end result. And if, as you're writing it, you think, well, hang on a minute, one of the characters pressed the lift button. So if the police were to take a fingerprint off that lift button, wouldn't that be a good idea? So you can introduce that. Or if they didn't, you can go back in your story and make the lead character press a lift button. You'd think nothing of it when you're reading it for the first bit, but when it comes to the second bit, you'll be thinking, oh no, don't look at the lift, don't look at the lift. Now you can, and what I did is I didn't just concentrate on the main bit where the police are investigating the crime. I included elements that were in the parallel story on the first section. Remember I said about you've got these parallel stories that are running. In the first bit we had windows and security, didn't we? Well, there are others as well. Now you may say to yourself, hang on a minute, we need to introduce a character here for confusion's sake, to get the reader to think that they're going to find the diamonds that have been stolen. They're going to find it. Who are they? They're furniture delivery people. Because George, that's the main character in this story, had got the items out of Dubai inside a furniture delivery van. So maybe the driver is going to find these diamonds. Well, how would he do that? Oh, because he's been robbing these vans for the last 6 months. Why has he been robbing them? Oh, because, and then you can write his story, chop it up, and you can stick that in the first section, maybe right at the start of the book. So when you're reading it, you're thinking, why are we reading about this character driving a lorry? But it's not until you've read a couple of those sections, and then at the end, you're reading about how he's robbing delivery vans, that you think, yeah, it's all coming together now, it's all coming together. So you can move these sections, these parallel stories, anywhere in the book that looks or reads sensibly. You don't want to shove too many parallel stories together without the main story in there somewhere. So I always try to do the parallel story and then the main story and then a parallel and then the parallel and then the main. And I tried to split it up, colour coded it so I could get back to it at any time I wanted to, easily. Right, so now we've robbed it, we planned it, we've robbed it, we've got the police involved. They're either going to succeed or they're not. What else are we going to do? Well, what about introducing the actual owners of the bank and where they're getting their money from? And at that stage, after I'd been writing the book, maybe 2 years, at that stage, the whole thing changed, where I thought, what if? And I added a section in the book about the money and all the items being the results of ill-gotten gains. Now, that section, I couldn't introduce those characters before that time. So when you read the book, you can see the sections of the story, and at that stage you've got the bad guys turn up. The real bad guys, the Russian mafia. And from that story onwards, it then becomes the Russian mafia are trying to get their goods back. They're after George and his friends who did the robbery. The police are trying to get who did the robbery, George and his friends. So the mafia start to do bad things. George has to stop these bad things. So how's George going to stop this? Well, the only way he can do it is by contacting the police and trying to set up some kind of a sting operation where the police catch the Russians. Well, I had to write that, didn't I? Now, I didn't know I was going to write any of this when I started the story 3 years earlier. my little plotty time graph has by this stage gone out the window. I've now diverted off into all manner of things, but it's still along the lines of robbing a bank. So you'll see how you'll start to write the book and it will develop into something else as you're writing it. It really will. But the main focus of it is trying to keep it all interesting. In my eyes, I tried to keep it light-hearted, and I tried to put myself in the characters as we go. So I could describe feelings, I could describe things which you would normally have at that event. You might be meeting in a bar. Now you could describe how you could write you was in a bar and you met the head policeman. Well, let's add a bit more story to it, for goodness sake. Was it raining outside? Was it not? How did the policeman get there? Is there another policeman waiting outside in the car? Is he armed? Have you decided how you're going to get out of the building if the policeman knows that you were involved in the robbery? What did you talk about? Was the barmaid attractive? What was the drink that you had? Did you have any food? You can add all of that in. You don't have to have it in the final book. You can edit it out. But you need to put it in, so at least you can edit it out in the final book, don't you? So just put down anything that you like that makes the story more readable. Put the book down for another 2 months. I think I did 6. I put myself, and I would recommend anyone do this, in the shoes of the main character. So I put myself as the guy that was building the defects in the building, the guy that was planning the robbery and trying to get away with it. So I put him reacting the same way as I would, and I react maybe the same way as most people to generally everything. So when you're reading it, or when the reader's reading it, he can think, yeah, that's what I would do as well. I wouldn't be hanging around, I'd be running away, or I'd be thinking about this, or yeah, I'd be a bit worried about this as well, you know. So if you can write it in that sort of way that links with the reader, they won't be putting the book down. They'll just carry on reading because they want to find out what happens next. That was what I did. So now we've got to a break. You've written the storyline. Put the book down for a couple of months and have a think about what comes next. I mean, how boring is it going to be to just read something and it finishes? I mean, I've read a few books like that where they drag you along, and just when you're getting interesting, you have a look at the book and there's 5 pages left and you think, this author was bloody lazy, he hasn't bothered to expand on any of this. I've seen a couple of films like that where the film goes on and goes on and goes on, and then right at the end, within 5 minutes of the ending, the lead character's wrapping the story up, and you're thinking, no. You've got to make it realistic as well. You can't just think of something out of a James Bond movie that's totally unrealistic. You've got to make it so the reader can go along with it. Oh, that's what I did. And then I put the book down again for another 3 months. I then did what I thought was the last review. How wrong can you get? Do you know how many times I reviewed the book, and not just sections I'd written, but the whole damn book? I'm up to about 32. I've read this book 32 times, and each with a different specific idea of what I was reading. Then you leave it for a couple of weeks and you read it again and you think, could do with changing a bit. So you change a bit and you change the characters' feelings or words that they say, or you think of something funny that night and you write that in your book. Yeah, I reckon I've done about 30 times. Just before you do the final proofread, you've read it through 4 times on a proof where you're doing full stops, sentences, words with hyphens. You're checking your facts on the internet, make sure that whatever facts you've said, the height that aeroplanes fly in the sky, you know, if you write 25,000 feet, someone's going to think, well, I thought it was 35. You know, they're going to pick you up. So whatever facts you've got to cross-check them. You've got to cross-check that you've got the names right. There was one such occasion where I'd put someone's wrong name in the main storyline for a whole conversation. Now, when I read through it individually, it made sense. But then when I read through it overall, I remembered that that person that was supposed to be in another country, and it was 2 other people that were having the conversation, and I'd put the wrong names down there. So it's things like that that you've got to pick up by yourself. No one else is going to help you. So you've now written your book, you've read it over 1,000 times, you think you're ready, which is a stage roughly I was at a couple of months ago. No, what am I saying? 6 months ago. You then got to find a publisher. Well, you should, if you follow these experts, get yourself a literary agent. Now these experts, they're not, I'll be honest with you, they're not interested. It's not worth spending your money. It's not worth spending your time. Don't even think about getting one. Because unless you're the likes of a well-known personality who decides to write their memoirs or a book, they use a literary agent. The likes of you and me, first timers, forget it. They ain't interested. They won't even reply to your letters. So forget them. The second way is to go direct to a publisher. Well, you can do that. You will get, every single one will be a knockback. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. I'm sure they don't even read it. They'll look at the headlines, the title. They'll look at the blurb that you've written of the book, because you have to write one of them. You have to write a précis. They won't even read it, and they'll send you a letter back that says the bank crime genre has been done to death. We're not interested in this book. We suggest you but it's very good books, well written, very humorous, we all had a good laugh. Da-di-da, it's very, very realistic, but we're not going to get involved. Times I had that story. So, direct to publishers. Again, unless you're a famous personality, they're not interested. They're really not interested. Some of them may offer you a publishing contract if you pay for the books, which isn't expensive, but maybe it's called the vanity press. So if you think that your book is good and someone says, I'll tell you what, I'll print it for you, it's going to cost you X amount of money, and then it's up to you to sell it. Some of them will offer you sales or a distribution, posters, that kind of thing. They're worth looking into if you're that keen. I'll be honest with you, that's the route I've gone down. I must have done 100 publishers and all of them turned me down. Now bear in mind that Lord of the Rings was turned down by about 50 of them before one finally thought, I'll give it a chance. So don't be downhearted that you spent all that time and energy writing your book and some faceless wonder says it's crap, because it probably isn't. It's probably got an interest, someone's going to read it. And if you advertise it on your Facebook page, hand it out at birthdays and Christmas time, you'll get round, you'll sort it out eventually. You sell a few copies. I went round to 3 bookshops, one in Manila and 2 where I live, and all of them said, yeah, bring it in, we'll put it on our shelves. Don't even want to read it, just bring it in. Well, actually one said give us a copy of it first, and they read it and went, oh yeah, bring it in, we'll sell it. So you just drop 5 copies off to them, and when they've sold 5, they'll give you a ring, and you go to your print on demand publisher, say give me another 25 copies, and you distribute them or sell them yourself until eventually you get known. Now what I'm going to do, I've been collecting a list of authors, well-known authors, movie producers, script writers, movie companies, and all of them are going to get 1 copy of my book. And if they buy the rights to the book for a film, I'm happy with that. That'll sort my retirement out, well and truly. So I've got a sore throat. I've eaten something that's not agreeing with me.